The happiest day of my life was the day I stopped trying to win. Not because I gave up, because I finally understood what the game was actually costing me, and I decided the price was too high. My name does not matter. What matters is that I am 83 years old. I rent a small room above a hardware store in a town in New Mexico that most people have never heard of, and I wake up every single morning without a knot in my chest. That knot, that tight burning thing that lives just below your sternum and never fully goes away, I know exactly what it feels like because I carried it for 15 years. And I know exactly what it feels like to put it down because I put it down in 1968 and I have not picked it up since. Let me tell you who I was before that. I grew up in suburban Connecticut, the son of a man who wore a tie every day of his adult life, including Saturdays. My father believed in two things with the totality of his being: hard work and appearances. What the neighbors thought was a topic of genuine daily concern in our household, what the men at his office thought, what the people at church thought. We lived for the opinion of people who were living for our opinion, and nobody in that entire ecosystem was actually happy, but everyone was extremely well dressed. I was smart. That was the one thing I had that my father understood how to be proud of. I got into a good university on a scholarship, studied pre law because that is what a smart boy from Connecticut did in 1961, graduated near the top of my class, got accepted to law school. My father shook my hand, which was the most physical affection he had shown me since I was 7 years old. First week of law school, I looked around at the other students and I saw something that has never left me. These were the brightest young men I had ever been in a room with, and every single one of them was afraid. Not nervous, afraid. Afraid of not finishing first. Afraid of what came after if they did not. Afraid of the phone call home if they stumbled. They had not started yet, and they were already exhausted by what they were running toward. I sat with that for about 2 weeks. I went to class, I took notes, I ate in the cafeteria, and listened to conversations about grades and clerkships and which firms paid the most. And one morning I woke up before my alarm and lay in the dark of my dormitory room and asked myself one question. If I do everything right from this point forward, if I finish at the top of this class and get the right job and make the right money and buy the right house, what will my Tuesday look like when I am 50? I lay there and I built that Tuesday in my head, carefully, honestly, the alarm, the commute, the office, the billable hours, the performance review, the mortgage, the Sunday evening feeling, that specific Sunday evening feeling of dread that millions of people treat as a normal part of adult life, as though dreading the next morning is just something you accept like weather. I built that Tuesday honestly, and I did not want it. I left at the end of the month, packed one bag, told my roommate I was going for a walk, and kept walking until I found a bus going west. My parents were not told until I was already in Ohio. My father's response, when it came, was brief and cold, and made it clear that I had committed a kind of betrayal he was not sure he could forgive. My mother cried. My aunts whispered. The general consensus among everyone who knew me was that I had lost my mind or my nerve or both. What I had actually lost was the knot in my chest. I want to describe what the next 60 years look like because I think people imagine that walking away from a law career in 1968 means you spent 60 years suffering romantically in a garret somewhere. That is not what happened. I worked. I have always worked. I just worked at things that did not require me to be someone I was not. I cooked in diners from New Mexico to Oregon. I drove trucks for a few years in my 30s. I worked a fishing boat in Alaska for one summer and nearly froze to death and loved almost every minute of it. I tended bar in small towns where nobody cared who I had almost been and everybody cared whether I poured a fair measure. I painted houses. I fixed fences. I read more books than I can count, mostly borrowed from libraries, because a library card costs nothing and the inside of a good book is as large as any house I could not afford to own. I was not poor in the way that people mean when they say that word with pity in their voice. I was low on money and high on time. That is a trade I made consciously, and I have never once, in 60 years, wished I had made it differently. Let me tell you about a man I knew in law school. I will call him David. David stayed. David was exactly the kind of student those professors loved: precise, ambitious, tireless, willing to sacrifice anything for the grade, and then for the job, and then for the partnership. He made it. Corporate law, corner office, the house in the right suburb, the car that announced itself when it pulled into a parking lot. We ran into each other once in our mid-40s. I was passing through the city where he lived, and we had coffee. He looked 20 years older than me, not because of illness, but because of something behind his eyes that had gone flat. He talked about his work with the voice of a man describing a prison he had built himself and could not figure out how to leave because he had spent so long building it. He talked about his children the way people talk about people they know of rather than people they know. He mentioned his wife twice, and both times looked at the table. He died at 61, heart. His obituary was long and listed many achievements. I am 83. I walked 4 miles this morning because I wanted to. I ate breakfast slowly and read the newspaper, and nobody needed anything from me before I was ready to give it. This afternoon I am going to help my neighbor fix a section of fence because he is 76 and his back is going, and I told him I would. Tonight I will sit on the step outside my room and watch the sky do what the sky does in New Mexico, which is put on a performance that no amount of money has ever improved upon. That is my Tuesday. That is the Tuesday I chose in that dormitory room 60 years ago when I lay in the dark and built it honestly. Now let me say something to you directly, because I think some of you watching this are sitting with your own knot, your own Sunday evening, your own sense that the life you are building looks right from the outside and feels hollow from the inside, and you are telling yourself that the feeling will go away when you get further along, when you make more, when you pay off more, when you achieve the next thing. It will not go away. I have never met a person for whom it went away on its own. The only thing that makes it go away is a decision, a real one. Not a fantasy about quitting, not a daydream about a different life, but an actual decision about what you are willing to trade and what you are not. I am not telling you to walk out of law school. I am not telling you to sell your house and move into a room above a hardware store. Your life is your own, and its shape is your business. I am telling you that the knot is not normal. The Sunday dread is not the price of being a responsible adult. The flatness behind the eyes is not what maturity looks like. These are symptoms. They are your life telling you something important that you are working very hard not to hear. Society has a word for people who stop playing the game: failure. It uses that word as a threat, as a fence, to keep you running in the direction that is useful to everyone except possibly you. I have been called a failure by people who were miserable. I have been called irresponsible by people who were afraid. I have been called lost by people who had no idea where they were going but were getting there very fast. I am 83. I have my health, my time, my conscience, and my Tuesday. You can call that failure if you want. I call it everything